Hey, welcome to the Sentinel Lab series, where I go through the setup of the fundamentals components of Sentinel. I'm following along a public guide, which you can also follow along, and you can even deploy your own trial to do all of that. In this video, where I'm covering the last module, Module 8, about Content Hub. If you do like this sort of video, make sure you subscribe and like the video as well for feedback. If not, dislike and leave a comment to let me know why. Okay, enough chit-chatting, let's dive in. Okay, so in this last module, we're actually talking about Content Hub. Content Hub is a core component of Sentinel, which includes solutions of data connectors, analytics rules, and workbooks, everything that it might be related to external and, of course, log sources that we're onboarding and ingesting into Sentinel. So it's a sort of a marketplace for different vendors to propose what works with their own log sources. When I say other vendors, I mean any security provider, right? Not just Microsoft, but many other security solutions that work with Sentinel. As an example here, let's navigate to Content Hub. So on the left-hand side here, we have Content Management and we have Content Hub. As I do this, you'll remember that we have gone through this many times as we onboarded data sources, as we started setting up threat intelligence, for example, as we started onboarding Microsoft 365 Defender solutions into Sentinel, we have gone through Content Hub. That is because Microsoft has moved away from what was previously all part of the data connectors section, as you can see here on the left-hand side. The data connectors section, which included the data connectors for these other sources. But now everything is part of Content Hub. So we can find data connectors and we can find analytics rules for these other sources, and we can find workbooks and a lot of other different content for these sources, all in Content Hub. So whenever you need to integrate something with Sentinel, come to Content Hub. That's the place for you. Now, as you can see here, we have a range of different providers already listed out in here, but we also have more than 290 solutions currently in here. If I want to look for a specific vendor solution, I can just leverage the search bar. For example, I could look into Cloudflare solutions. As I click on this solution, you can see here on the right-hand side the content type that is part of this solution. So we have analytics rules, we have data connector, workbooks, even parser for queries, and even hunting queries. So everything that makes use of that log source in my environment. If I want to onboard all this different content and solution in my environment, I need to install it. So installing Content Hub content is generally free, right? I've never seen pricing here be any different than free. But then, of course, there are some dependencies. For Cloudflare, I need potentially to be part of a premium tier that allows me to ingest some sort of this content into my environment. For example, I'm not aware. But just to be sure you understand that the connector is mostly likely free, but the data source itself, of course, you'll have to have a look into that provider's information. Once you install it, it's going to take a few seconds. You're going to see the install button change to manage. So now we can click on manage, and you have access to a range of all the content that was promised to us, essentially, as part of that connector. So here's the content table. So we have different content types, and each content type has their own icon, and you can validate the content type here on the content type column as well. So you can see, for example, that we have one data connector, looks like this grid. So if I click and select this particular line, I have the option to open the connector page, and this is how I would connect that particular data source to my Sentinel environment. When I install this, I added a number of analytics rules to my rule templates. So from now onwards, I can look for these analytics rules under my rule templates, or I can just navigate to the Content Hub of that provider and find those rules in here. The hunting queries, much the same, right? Available through here or through my hunting section in Sentinel. And I can also see what other content is available for me as part of this solution. So you've seen me install this. If I wanted to onboard specific information, specific sources, I could do that. Let's try and do that with Office information. Let's go ahead and choose Azure Active Directory. instead of Office. You can see here that this is a solution, meaning it has a range of many different content types available here, including a data connector that I want for this source. We go ahead and install this, and after a few seconds, I can go ahead and manage it. And here at the top, I didn't cover this before, but in here at the top, you can see that we have two icons: the green for installed content from other providers potentially, but I also have the exclamation mark here for configuration needed. Go ahead and choose the data connector, which is where we should always get started when we're thinking of Content Hub. Let me open the connector page. I get to see a range of prerequisites for that data connector to work, and it checks my permissions as my user in Azure, checks potential other tenant permissions that I might need to be aware of before integrating this. Now under configuration, I can choose for this particular data connector, I have to choose what sort of information I want to bring in from that data source into Sentinel, into that Azure Active Directory data table. Each data connector will potentially have their own table. Syslog and Ceph data connectors, for example, will not have different tables. You'll have all these different solutions that talk to these protocols into their same tables in Sentinel. But this particular native and service-to-service, Microsoft service-to-service connection allows us to do this specific. Go ahead and choose all of these and apply these changes. Now it's going to check for permissions on the background, and if I needed to authenticate, it would tell me so. Since I don't, it's just taking that information and enable it for me. Now after a few seconds, the status will change from the warning to just okay, right? And it's going to tell me the status here. Instead of being disconnected, it's going to be connected. So this color is going to change green to indicate that now this data connector is all good and it's working fine. From this point onwards, this is where I can start creating use cases and enabling analytics rules for this data source, much like we've done many times now throughout this series. So I could look into what potential use case I want to enable in my environment and go through the configuration of analytics rule. In this particular solution, we have playbooks as well to be enabled. So playbooks allow us to automate some specific actions. For example, we can revoke Azure Active Directory sign-in sessions using entity trigger. So if we have an incident with a person that's part of AAD, we can now start using that action to revoke their sign-in session. For example, right from the incident management, for example. So you could configure, create that playbook, go through the setup, authentication if required, and so on and so forth. Just to validate further that the content part of that data connector is now available to me, let me navigate to Analytics. For example, under Analytics, we've done this before, but we can go into rule templates. I can create a filter for data sources. So under data sources, let me create for Azure Active Directory. And now you can see that we have a range of rule templates available to me, many of which came from that solution integration that I just did. And I could just go ahead and create the necessary rule creation right from here if I wanted to as well. If I want to consume workbooks, I can come into workbooks, and under my templates, we have a lot more options. So if you've been following me before, you would have seen that I would only have a handful here, but as I installed Cloudflare and as I installed Azure Active Directory, I have a lot more workbook templates available to me in my environment. This is all thanks to the Content Hub solution that I installed. Lastly, let's validate hunting queries. So if I come into queries and I clear out my filters and I add a filter for data sources, I can just choose Azure Activity, for example, and I can validate that I have a range of Azure Activity for me here, part of the Content Hub that I enabled as well. So with this all said and done, this is module 8, the last module of the Sentinel app guides. Hopefully you found this series informative. And if you did, make sure you let me know. Okay, with all this said and done, this is Module 8 about Content Hub. Hopefully you found this information valuable to you. So we've learned about what Content Hub is, a brief look at its history. So moving away from data connectors to Content Hub, which includes a range of other different content as part of integrations with other security vendors and information providers. And then how to consume each of these content types within many different parts of the Sentinel dashboard, through analytics rules, through workbooks, through hunting queries, and how to set up data connectors, even playbooks, right? So hopefully you found all this informative. Make sure you leave a comment and let me know in the comments what you found of this entire series. Thank you again, and have a good one.